Hello drummers, musicians, and YouTubers. Drum teacher Tim Connolly at you today with a very special edition of Tim Connolly Drums. Today we're going to talk about my favorite top 10 drum books. Now, drum books have influenced my life and my drumming career heavily, very heavily. Reading music, in my opinion, is vitally important. And drum books are a big part of learning how to read. So these are my top 10. Now, normally I do them in reverse order, 10 down to 1, to create suspense and hopefully the listeners or the watcher sticks around and doesn't bolt on me during the video because they've already seen the number 1. But in this case today, I have to work from 1 to 10. It's just the way I want to do it. I like to change things up once in a while. So number 1, very popular book. By the way, these books are all books that I think every drummer should have. So this is number 1, Stick Control, George Lawrence Stone, legendary book. I've spent so much time, my students laugh at me because I have the thing memorized. It's unbelievable how much time I have spent on this book. It's a legendary book. It basically contains 76 variations of stickings, which is pretty much every combination that you can use in sticking. So it starts off with singles, goes to doubles, paradiddles, and it's every sticking, starting with the right hand, starting with the left hand, and every inversion and every sticking that you can imagine is in this book. I have worked on page 5, 6, and 7, which is numbers 1 to 76, or numbers 1 to 72 rather, extensively. And I am very familiar with all these stickings. Do I use all 72? No, but I do use a lot of them. And it's good to learn them all so that you've got more tricks in your bag to pull out. So this is number 1, George Lawrence Stone, Stick Control, a must-have. Second one, you're gonna laugh, but I don't have the cover. It's an old book and I don't have the cover. This is Syncopation. I'll show you the last page. This is the forward. It's actually a blue cover. You'll see it up here. This is Syncopation. This is another book I memorized. I spent so much time on page 37 in the old book and page 38 in the new version. Spending so much time developing jazz independence with this book, rock independence, and reading. Vital book for developing all your independence and your reading. Syncopation. And it's written by Ted Reed. Legendary book. I forgot to mention Stick Control came out in 1936. This came out, I believe, in 1952 or 53, something like that. They're both old books, but absolute must-haves, okay? So Syncopation, number 2, vital for reading, vital for developing coordination, and I highly recommend these two, especially Stick Control and Syncopation as my 1 and 2. That I always use and I always teach my students out of these 2 books. Very important. Number 3, I love this book, The New Breed by Gary Chester. Very difficult book. There's a second one called The New Breed 2, and it was called The Hardest Drum Book Ever Written. Now, I have worked my way through this entire book. It took me a long time, but I worked my way through it. This book is absolutely incredible for developing your coordination, your independence, your dynamics, your ability to play really slowly and really accurately. This is a fantastic book. This book is broken down into sections where you have to learn Gary's systems first. Once you get the ostinato systems, then you apply the reading. And of course, the ostinatos change all the way through. And the reading changes too. The reading is really good. It starts off easy, the reading, and then gets more and more difficult. The ostinatos get very difficult too. And then you've got to read against the ostinatos. So for example, let's say you're playing eighth notes with your right hand, you're stepping quarter notes with your left foot, and you're playing 2 and 4 with your left hand, something pretty straight ahead. Then you read with your right foot. So the ostinato is the eighth notes, the quarter notes, and the half notes. Then the bass drum reads the melodies. Okay, and then of course it switches. Maybe your left hand is playing eighth notes, your left foot is reading, your right foot is now playing the quarter notes, and your right hand is playing 2 and 4. So you develop all levels of independence and coordination with this book. I highly recommend Gary's book. Gary, for those of you who are not familiar with him, was one of the most prolific studio drummers in the 60s, 70s, and somewhat into the 80s. He's the drummer on Brown Eyed Girl. Do I have to say any more? That pretty much sums it up. He played on thousands and thousands of recordings, and he's a legendary drummer. And this book is legendary, and I highly recommend you get this book. I remember the first time I saw this book was in Dave Weckel's Back to Basics tape/DVD years and years ago. And I thought, oh, I got to check this out, you know. And Dave Weckel was the guy that sort of introduced this to me, along with my drum teacher. It kind of happened around the same time, back in the 80s. And this book was new back then, because sadly, right after the book was pretty much published, Gary sadly passed away. So he never really got to see the rewards from how great his book was and how it influenced so many drummers over the years. But Dave Weckel was the guy that got me onto this, and I'm going to try to get all of you onto this, because this is a fantastic book. Okay, so the fourth book, very, very important book, Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer by Jim Chapin. Now, my copy is white because it was a special limited edition copy that Jim signed. The original book, often imitated, never equaled. Very true. This is a fantastic jazz independence coordination book. Now, for all of you rock drummers out there that don't think it's important to play jazz, tell that to Danny Carey. Tell that to Neil Peart. Tell that to any famous rock drummer, Keith Moon. Tell that to John Bonham. They all studied and learned from jazz drummers. So very, very important book, not only for developing your jazz independence, but also for developing your rock, Latin, fusion, funk, you name it. This book can be used for every style of music. Don't get fooled by the fact that it's technically a jazz book, okay? Now, I got mine signed by Jim, which is really, really awesome. Now, Jim Chapin, of course, is very famous for studying with a molar and going around the world teaching everybody about the molar technique. And this was also his book that almost as famous as he was in terms of going around the world. This book is published everywhere, and every drummer should have it. Another fantastic book. All these books are really fantastic. The only thing is, though, you do have to have, if I open it up just briefly, you do have to have some reading skills for all of these books. Now, stick control is fairly easy. Syncopation, a little bit harder. New Breed, even harder. This one, even harder. They're getting harder and harder as I'm moving along in terms of reading skills, okay? But, you know, this is a book that's going to help you advance your reading skills and your coordination and your technique and everything. It's an everything drum book, and I highly recommend it. Another one, unfortunately, I lost the cover for. I've lost a few covers here, as you're going to see. This is a book by Joe Morello, the legendary Joe Morello, and it's called Master Studies. Now, you want to master stick control first. Joe was actually a student of George Lawrence Stone, the author of Stick Control. And Joe took, with blessings from George Lawrence Stone, George's ideas and developed it and advanced it to Master Studies. There's also a Master Studies 2 as well. And Joe took the original stickings a little bit further and advanced them and came and added his own spice and Joe's own ideas. This is an excellent, excellent book for developing your technique. But I highly recommend you get stick control down and then you turn to this, because this is like a step up from stick control. So I highly recommend stick control, then this. This is a fantastic book. I've spent so much time studying. This is my absolute favorite exercise right here, and it's called the Stone Killer. I have another video playing the Stone Killer and demonstrating it, but this is one of my favorite exercises ever. the Stone Killer exercise from Joe Morello. So, Master Studies and Master Studies 2, you cannot go wrong if you're looking to develop your technique. These two books, brilliant. Joe was a fantastic player. His technique was second to none, and he was also known as Buddy Rich's favorite drummer. So that's got to go places. Another coverless book, Afro Cuban Rhythms for the Drum Set. Written by two guys that taught at the Drummers Collective, Frank Malabe and Bob Weiner. Fantastic book to learn Afro-Cuban rhythms. From the mambo to the songo to merengue, cha-cha-cha, you name it, every Afro-Cuban style is covered in here. I use this and teach out of this book to all my students. I don't care if you are a death metal player, you're going to learn how to play Afro-Cuban in my world, because Afro-Cuban music is awesome. Fantastic. What I like to do, and what I tell all my students and teach all my students is, take the Afro-Cuban rhythms you learn in this book and do play-alongs and learn how to play traditional Afro-Cuban music, and then apply it to rock. There's so many songs where the rock beat at some point gets changed into possibly some form of an Afro-Cuban groove, like a songo, a mambo. There's tons and tons of rock tunes that have Latin grooves in them. And it's really important for drummers to be versatile. So Afro-Cuban music is very, very difficult to play. Not going to lie to you, these are not like simple rock beats. These are quite advanced, especially in the cowbell playing or the cymbal parts where you're playing a broken pattern. You're not playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or 1 E and a 2 E and a. You're playing like a broken pattern, you know, like da 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 da, that kind of a broken pattern. And this book helps you develop all that you need to know to become a great Afro-Cuban drummer. And then when you take this and get this down, apply it to your rock, your funk, your jazz fusion, whatever style of music. You can definitely use this, and I highly recommend every drummer learn how to use this. Now, my drum teachers emphasize this, and I actually studied with a Cuban drummer that absolutely emphasized that this book was the best book for learning anything to do with Afro-Cuban music. There's a lot of history in here. There's a lot of good stuff. The two authors are fantastic Afro-Cuban players who were teachers at the Drummers Collective in New York City back in the day. Awesome, awesome book, awesome authors. All right, now we get into some linear stuff. Advanced Funk Studies by Rick Latham. Fantastic book for starting to develop your linear grooves in the funk genre, which can be used in any genre. Don't be fooled by titles. You know, the Afro-Cuban book, yes, you're learning Afro-Cuban, but like I said, you can transform that into funk, into rock, into pop, anything. Same thing with this. Just because it says Funk Studies doesn't mean you only use it in funk music. These beats can be used in all styles of music, even heavy metal for that matter, okay? Now, this book, again, reading, a little bit tricky, but really, really great book. Now, this is my favorite part. I know I love the you know, Rick's actual grooves and licks and stuff, but this part here, where it breaks down traditional grooves from legendary players. Like this is 2 pages of Steve Gadd stuff. Okay? Then we've got, actually it's 3, almost 4 pages of Steve Gadd stuff. Then we got some David Garibaldi, some Peter Erskine, some Harvey Mason. Like it takes some of the really great drummers that play in a linear style, and they, he's got it here for you to work on. So you can learn some really cool grooves from really great drummers. Now linear, for those that don't know, means playing in a line. And you're not necessarily lining up the bass, the snare, the hi-hat. They kind of play in a line, like hi-hat, snare, and bass, 1 E and, or 1 E and up. You hit the snare drum as well. And sometimes they line up a little bit. The hi-hat might line up with the bass drum, but then the snare's linear or any form of combination like that. But this is a really, really great book. It's been around a long time. I've spent a lot of time on this book. Rick is a really great player. If you want to go on Rick's website or check him out on YouTube and see how this is supposed to sound, because there is a specific sound that goes along with this linear style of playing. And Rick is a legendary linear player. So check Rick's book out. I highly recommend it. All right. Number 8 on my list, another great linear book, Future Sounds, by legendary funk drummer David Garibaldi from Tower of Power. I love this book. I love linear grooves, and I love linear playing, and I love David Garibaldi. This book changed my life in terms of the way that I play and the way that I hear music, and the way that linear funk grooves rather, are so cool. This book, when you figure out how to play the grooves in this book, you will be so excited because it elevates your playing to another level. Check out David Garibaldi. Now, the book doesn't necessarily cover a lot of his actual grooves with Tower of Power. My favorite part is what's called the permutation studies. So permutation number 1, number 2, etc., etc. Permutations means that you're taking every possible way to play the groove, and you're permutating through the different 16th notes to play the groove. So you might be you start on the 1, then you go to the E, the and, the 2, etc., etc. And it's different permutations and different approaches to playing a groove. And there's so many of them. I think the permutations, there's 17 permutation studies, and then there's all the groove studies. Now the groove studies are just various different grooves that Dave likes to play, and they're not necessarily any actual song grooves. Of course, you can take them and turn them into song grooves, but page after page after page of grooves and groove studies. So I highly recommend David Garibaldi's book as well. This will change the way you play. Really, really will change you. And check out Dave's playing. He's killer, man. Tower of Power, those grooves are killer. There's some of the greatest drumming you'll ever see is from this man. And you can get a little piece of David Garibaldi if you work on this book. Trust me on that. All right, now this one here is the PDF. This book is 4-Way Coordination by Marvin Dahlgreen and Elliot Fine. Sorry, I just had to check those names. This is probably not as common as the other books, but this is a really, really great book for developing your independence coordination. I've got the printed off version here, and really, really excellent book for developing skills around the drum kit and developing your coordination. It deals with separating the limbs so that you take a pattern like snare bass, bass 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and for example, and then you put a hi-hat pattern against that. Could be quarter notes, could be eighth notes, could be 16th notes, could be 16th note triplets, whatever. Then you put your left foot against it as well. Could be eighth notes, could be the and of the eighth notes, could be quarter notes, could be half notes, could be a whole note. I mean, there's endless combinations, and this book basically covers them all. So I highly recommend this book for working on your coordination and developing your skills. A fantastic book. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about, number 10, I actually don't have the book. I loaned it out. We drum teachers tend to loan our books. We never get them back. I'll try and remember who I loaned it to and get it back. In the meantime, I just ordered another copy. But it's the Drummers Cookbook. I can't remember who wrote it, but the Drummers Cookbook, it's the one where it's an old book. It's like from the late 60s or early 70s, but it's another great coordination book. It's really, really good for beginners because it takes you through quite slowly from the beginning of learning coordination all the way through to more advanced coordination. Really, really great book. The Drummers Cookbook is the one with Buddy Rich. Well, it looks like Buddy Rich on the cover. I've always thought it was Buddy Rich. Maybe it's not Buddy, but I've always thought it was Buddy Rich. So anyways, that is my top 10 greatest drum books of all time. I hope you enjoyed. Please go and check these books out. If you don't know how to read music, learn how to read music. It's vital. It'll make your life so much easier. Learning to read and being able to utilize these books is going to make you a much, much better drummer. Go out and get some of these books. I'm sure they're available anywhere on eBay, Amazon, music stores, etc., etc. Keep drumming. Subscribe, like, comment. Let me know some of your favorite drum books, because obviously I've missed some. There's tons and tons. I have tons and tons of drum books, but these were my favorites. All right, take care. See ya.